The docking bay of Station Aurora was cold and silent as the royal shuttle descended. Captain James Harrison stood at attention with his squad, his dress uniform pressed and sharp. He had fought in 7 wars across 3 planets. He had lost friends and brothers in combat. But standing here now, waiting to meet an alien princess, he felt something different. Not fear, something closer to dread. The shuttle doors hissed open. First came the guards, tall creatures with silver skin that gleamed under the station lights. Their bones were visible beneath their skin, not in a way that made them look weak, but in a way that made them look like weapons. They were royal guards, and they had killed thousands. Then she came down the ramp. Princessa was nothing like James expected. She was smaller than her guards, barely 7 feet tall, with long dark hair that fell past her shoulders. Her eyes were a deep violet color that seemed to absorb light. She wore robes of golden material that moved like liquid when she walked. She was beautiful in a way that made James understand why empires went to war over such things. She looked at him, and her eyes narrowed. "This is your strongest soldier?" she asked, her voice carrying a note of amusement and contempt. "It is so small, so fragile. I can see the blood moving beneath its skin." James kept his face steady. He had been trained to handle insults. He had been trained to not react to provocation. But hearing her call him it hit harder than he expected. "Welcome to Station Aurora, Princess," he said, his voice level and professional. "I am Captain James Harrison. I will be assisting with your security during your visit." Turned to her head guard and spoke in her own language. The guards laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It was the laugh of creatures who had decided something was beneath their notice. "You will do," said, looking back at James. "Show me to my chambers. I wish to rest before the negotiations. Your species seems to need rest constantly. How do you accomplish anything when you must spend 1/3 of your existence sleeping?" James gestured toward the corridor. "If you will follow me, Princess." As they walked, continued speaking, as if to herself. "The Empire has existed for 9,000 of your years," she said. "My family has ruled for 3,000 of those years. Each lives for 1,000 years. We have built cities that cover entire continents. We have ships that can destroy planets. And you humans, you have existed for how long? A few thousand years. And you send your young to die in wars fought over resources that will not matter in 100 years. We live shorter lives," James said quietly, "so we value them more." Stopped walking. She turned to look at him, and for a moment something flickered in her violet eyes. Not respect. Not yet, but something. A moment of actual consideration. "That is a simple way of thinking," she said. "Perhaps that is all your short minds can manage." They reached her chambers. They were the finest rooms on the station, with a view of the stars and furniture designed to accommodate physiology. James made sure everything was correct. He checked the temperature settings. The water systems worked. He tested the communication panel. Watched him work with an expression of mild amusement. "Your kind moves so quickly," she observed. "Like prey animals, darting here and there, always afraid that death is coming soon." "We live with the knowledge that it is," James replied, finishing his check. "So we try to make our time matter." "How exhausting," said. She moved to the window and looked out at the stars. "Tomorrow we will begin the negotiations. My empire needs an alliance with Earth. The collective grows stronger each year. They will not stop until they control every system in this sector. But I do not see why my people need to rely on creatures as weak as humans. We could simply destroy the ourselves." "They have better numbers than you believe," James said. "They have infiltrated 17 systems. They control more of the sector than your intelligence reports show. If the Empire faces them alone, you will lose." Turned from the window, and her violet eyes flashed with anger. "You dare tell me that my empire is weak?" "No," James said. "I am telling you that we are not as weak as you think, and together we are stronger than you are alone. That is not weakness, that is strategy." Stared at him for a long moment. James could see her thinking. He could see her trying to decide if he was worth killing for his insolence or if he might be useful. "You may go," she said finally. "Return tomorrow morning to escort me to the negotiations. And Captain, do not ever suggest that the Empire needs help. We are merely choosing to accept it." James nodded and left the chamber. As the doors slid shut behind him, he allowed himself to release a long breath. She was exactly what he had been told to expect. Proud, arrogant, dismissive, but she had listened. For one moment she had actually considered his words. He did not know yet how important that moment would become. That night, James sat in the station's command center with Commander Lisa Park. They reviewed the security protocols for the negotiations. Lisa was sharp, the best tactical officer James had ever served with. She had scars on her face from a blade. She understood what it meant to fight creatures that did not value your life. "How is she?" Lisa asked. "Arrogant," James said. "Dangerous. She thinks humans are insects." "Are we going to convince her otherwise?" James looked at the display showing the ship in orbit. It was beautiful and terrible, like a blade made of light. "We have to," he said, "because if we do not, humanity dies, and so does the Empire, that will not stop for anyone." Lisa nodded. They both understood the stakes. The alliance had to work. There was no other choice. Neither of them knew that in less than 20 hours, everything would change. Neither of them knew that the collective had already made its move. They were already inside the station. The assassination team was already in position. Death was already coming down the corridor, moving fast and quiet, like the diplomatic dinner had been planned to celebrate the beginning of negotiations. The station's grand hall was decorated with flowers from a dozen worlds. There were foods and drinks that represented cultures from across known space. Princess sat at the head of the table, looking bored as Earth's ambassador made a speech about cooperation and mutual benefit. James stood near the entrance, watching. His security detail was positioned at key points throughout the hall. Every entrance was covered. Every exit was monitored. He had checked the security protocols himself. Station Aurora was locked down than a military fortress. Nothing could get through without being detected. He was wrong. The alarm came at 1900 hours, exactly as planned by the strategists. A fire on the lower levels. Automatic systems began sealing doors, creating isolated sections. The security personnel split their attention. Some rushed toward the fire. Others remained at their posts. For a species as long-lived and cautious as such protocols made sense. But for creatures who were truly a threat, it created gaps. The assassins came through those gaps. They were nothing like the soldiers James had fought before. These creatures had been engineered for one purpose only: killing. Their bodies were covered in muscle and grafted weapons. One of them had a blade that could cut through steel. Another had a toxin that could melt flesh from bone. The leader, a creature the called, had been enhanced so many times that it was hard to believe it had once been anything biological at all. The attack came from multiple directions at once. The first guard went down without a sound. The assassin's blade went through his armor like it was cloth. The second guard raised his weapon but was too slow. A toxin sprayed from a dispenser and he collapsed, screaming as his skin began to burn from the inside. The third guard managed to fire once before being cut down, his shot going wild and hitting a light fixture instead of a target. The hall descended into chaos. Diplomats and officials ran in every direction. The alarm system wailed. The security doors began to lower, trapping people in different sections of the room. James was moving before his mind caught up with what his body was doing. He ran toward the sound of combat, weapon drawn, his training taking over. He saw the 3 remaining guards forming a defensive line around Princess. They were good, better than good. James had seen the recordings of their training. They had conquered a dozen worlds, but the assassins were faster and smarter and more vicious. Moved like something that had shed gravity itself. The creature's primary blade flashed and one of the guards screamed. James fired 3 times, his shots hitting true, but the creature barely slowed down. The armor was too good. Years of war research meant the assassins had been built to withstand almost anything Earth technology could throw at them. One of the guards went down, blood pouring from his side. Then another. The third guard, young and fierce, held his ground in front of. He was brave. He was dedicated. He was going to die. James did not think about it. He did not weigh the consequences. He simply acted. He grabbed by her arm and pulled her away from the guard. It was not graceful. It was not tactical. It was desperate. But it worked. Stumbled forward, away from the line of combat. James pushed her toward one of the service exits. Behind him, the last guard fell, his body dropping like a heavy stone. "Move," James shouted and moved. They ran through the corridors. Alarms screamed all around them. The station shook from secondary explosions on the lower levels. They had planned this carefully. The fire was not random. It was part of the attack. They had studied the station systems. They had known exactly how to cause the most chaos. Behind them, James could hear the sounds of pursuit. Fast footsteps, equipment that clicked and hummed. Was moving faster now, her fear overriding her sense of superiority. They burst through a sealed door that James had to override with his security code. It bought them maybe 30 seconds. They ran into an engineering section. James knew this area. He had studied every inch of Station Aurora when he arrived. He knew where the reinforced doors were. He knew where the emergency protocols could be activated. He guided through a series of service corridors, moving deeper into the station. The pursuit did not stop. A blade tore through a door panel just as they passed through it. Another assassin appeared behind them, moving with terrifying speed. James pushed through a maintenance hatch and sealed it behind them. The metal screamed as they tried to cut through it. It would not hold for long. There, James said, pointing to a reinforced communications station. Get inside, lock the door, call for help, tell them to send everyone they have. What about you? Asked. Her voice was different now, not arrogant, afraid. I will buy time, James said. He did not wait for her to argue. He turned and faced the direction where the assassins would come through. He checked his weapon, 3 rounds left in the magazine. He had a knife. He had his training. He had the knowledge that dying here was better than letting them reach. The reinforced door buckled under the weapons. It would give way in seconds. James activated his emergency beacon. The station would know where he was now. Help would come, maybe not in time to save him, but in time to save her. The door burst open. The bullet hit in the shoulder, drilling through armor and into synthetic muscle beneath. It was not enough to stop the creature, but it was enough to make it hesitate. That hesitation lasted less than a second, but a second was enough. James moved. He dropped the weapon and rolled left. His blade came down where he had been standing and buried itself in the metal floor, cutting through it like a knife through paper. James came up with his knife drawn, his training taking over completely now. His hands moved on their own, muscle memory, and thousands of hours of practice pushing his conscious mind aside. Pulled his blade free and came at James again. The creature was faster, stronger, better. James was none of those things, but he was something else. He was human. And humans had learned to fight things stronger than themselves since the beginning of time. His body moved in ways that should not have worked against a creature like, but they did. He ducked when he should have been hit. He blocked when blocking should have been impossible. He retreated when he should have fought. The blade caught him on the second pass. It sliced across his chest, cutting through armor and flesh. Pain exploded through James's body like lightning. He could feel blood pouring from the wound. He could feel the edges of the blade scraping against his ribs. A human should have been dead from such a cut. James did not die. Instead, he screamed, a sound of rage and pain and defiance. He grabbed his arm with his bleeding hand and held on. It was a stupid move. It was a move that made no tactical sense, but it was human. Come on, James snarled through clenched teeth, his blood dripping onto his armor. Come on, you overgrown machine. Yanked its arm free, tearing more flesh from James's hand. The creature did not understand why this fragile biological creature was still moving. It did not understand that humans could run on adrenaline and willpower long after their bodies should have failed them. It did not understand that the threat was no longer James. The threat was time. The alarm on James's wrist was chirping. Help was coming. Security teams from across the station were moving to his location. The assassins did not have much time. James pushed forward, ignoring the pain, ignoring the blood, ignoring the simple biological fact that he should already be dead. He kept his body between and the communications station where was safe. He was buying seconds now, nothing more. But seconds were what mattered. Run, he shouted toward the station. Get out of here, use the secondary exit. He did not know if heard him. He did not know if she was even still there. All he knew was that his job was to keep the assassin occupied. His job was to buy time. His job was to not die. Came at him again, and this time the creature was faster, smarter, meaner. Its blade was a blur of motion. James could not defend against all of it. A cut opened on his shoulder, another on his thigh. His blood was spraying now, painting the metal walls red. He was not going to make it. Some part of his brain that was still thinking clearly knew that. The wounds were too deep. The blood loss was too great. A human body could only do so much, push so hard for so long before it simply gave up the ghost. But James had one more trick. He had one more second where his nervous system would obey his commands. One more moment where his hands would move. He pulled a small device from his belt with his left hand, even as his right hand held up the knife in a useless defense. It was an emergency distress beacon, military grade, the kind that would send out a signal to every armed human within 100 kilometers. He activated it one-handed, his fingers moving even as fresh pain lanced through his body. Then James did something stupid. He stepped forward instead of back. He moved toward instead of away. He put his body directly in the path of the creature's blade, and he grabbed. His arms wrapped around weapon arm. His bleeding hands gripped synthetic muscle. His broken body pushed against something designed specifically to kill him. The blade came down. It missed because James was in the way. It would have cut him into pieces if he was lucky. But James had already started screaming again, already twisting, already forcing his arm back and up. One final act of human desperation. One final moment of stubborn, furious, absolutely irrational will. The security teams arrived 90 seconds later. When they burst through the corridors, what they found was a scene that would be talked about for generations. They found Captain James Harrison on his knees, bleeding from a dozen wounds, his body barely functioning, his mind barely conscious. They found and two other assassins dead, their bodies torn apart by fire and blade and pure human rage. They found Princess standing in the doorway of the communications station, her eyes wide with shock and understanding. She was staring at James, not at the assassins, not at the carnage, at James. The soldiers quickly brought reinforcements. Medical teams rushed to secure the area. One of the security officers, a woman named Commander Sandra Cole, went to James and checked his wounds. "I need a medical team right now," she said into her comm. "Captain Harrison is critical, multiple lacerations, severe blood loss, possible organ damage. Move now." James looked up at her with fatting eyes. He managed to whisper. "She is safe," Sandra said. "She is right here. You did it, Captain. You protected her." James's eyes slid closed. His breathing was shallow. He was still alive, barely, but only by the smallest margin. Above him, Princess looked down at the fragile human creature who had chosen to bleed out rather than let harm come to her. She reached down and touched his shoulder, her cool hand making contact with his burning human skin. In that moment, something broke inside her. Some wall of superiority and arrogance that she had built over 1,000 years of life cracked and shattered. This was not weakness. This was not the behavior of an inferior species. This was something else entirely. This was something her people had forgotten how to do thousands of years ago. The medical bay of Station Aurora was kept at a temperature that human bodies found cold. The machines beeped in steady rhythms, monitoring vitals and blood oxygen and 100 other things that Dr. Young had dedicated her life to understanding. She stood over Captain James Harrison's medical pod and watched the readouts with an expression that mixed hope and dread. He should have been dead. By all the medical science available to Earth, James Harrison should have been a corpse. The blade had cut deeply enough to nick his lung. His blood loss was in the catastrophic range. Multiple organs had sustained damage. He had been without proper blood pressure for nearly 3 minutes while the emergency medical team got him to the bay. But James was human. And humans, it turned out, were surprisingly hard to kill. Had been working on him for 7 hours straight. Surgery after surgery, transfusions, organ repair, synthetic tissue grafts. She had used every technique and every drug available to keep the man alive. At several points, she had heard his heart flatline. Each time, she brought him back. Now, finally, he was stable, not recovering, not out of danger, but stable. "How is he?" a voice asked from behind her. Turned to see Princess standing in the doorway of the medical bay. They had been there for most of the surgery, waiting in an observation area. She had watched every cut, every repair, every moment that James's life had hung in the balance. "He is going to live," said. "It is going to take time, but he will survive." Stepped forward and looked down at James's unconscious form. His chest was wrapped in bandages. Tubes ran from his arms and from his nose. His skin was pale in a way that made him look more fragile than ever before. But his heart was beating. His lungs were breathing. His body was alive. "How is this possible?" asked. "The wounds were mortal. I have seen die from less damage." Gestured for to follow her. They walked to a workstation where pulled up James's medical records and scans. Humans are adapted to survive on a harsh world, explained. Earth's gravity is stronger than most planets. Our atmosphere is thin. Our climate is extreme. We live alongside predators and diseases that would kill most species. Over millions of years, our bodies learn to be resilient. Our blood clots faster than other species. Our organs can function at lower oxygen levels. Our nervous systems can manage catastrophic pain without shutting down. And perhaps most important, our bodies produce hormones during extreme stress that push our physiology beyond its normal limits. Listened carefully, her violet eyes focused on the data streaming across the display. You are saying his weakness is actually a form of strength, said. I am saying humans are not weak, replied. We are different. We survived by being adaptable, not by being superior. When something tries to kill us, our bodies do not give up. We have adrenaline and willpower and the biological capacity to keep fighting long after logic says we should be dead. Pulled up a comparison image showing physiology next to human physiology. Your people are built for longevity, continued. You can live 1,000 years. You are physically stronger. You are faster. You can sense things humans cannot sense. But you are also optimized for stability and safety. A wound that would kill a human slowly kills because your bodies expect to have time to repair themselves. You do not expect to have to survive on willpower and adaptation. Stared at the images for a long time without speaking. He did not have to do this, she said finally. He could have let me defend myself. My guards were trained. I have combat experience. He is a soldier, said. That is what soldiers do. They protect the people they serve. It does not matter if it makes logical sense. It does not matter if the odds are bad. They do it anyway. Turned away from the display and looked back at James's unconscious form. Will he wake soon? She asked. Yes, said. Perhaps in an hour he will be in pain. The damage was severe. The healing process will be long, but he will wake. Decided to wait. She sat in a chair next to James's medical pod and watched him sleep. For the first time in 1,000 years of life, Princessa felt something that was not contempt or arrogance or the simple satisfaction of power. She felt something that was more complex, more painful. She felt respect. An hour later, James's eyes opened. For a moment, he did not seem to understand where he was. His eyes were unfocused and confused. Then slowly, recognition came back. Pain came back. James tried to sit up and immediately stopped, his body reminding him that moving was a very bad idea. Do not move, said from across the room. Your body needs rest. James looked around until his eyes settled on. For a moment, neither of them spoke. You lived, said finally. I did not think you would. The wounds were too grave. Humans are hard to kill, James replied, his voice rough from the surgery. Especially when we have a reason to keep living. Why did you do it? Asked. You barely know me. I said your species was weak. I said you were worthless. Why would you sacrifice yourself for me? James took a moment to gather his thoughts. The pain was terrible. The medicines flowing through his system made his mind feel distant and strange, but he tried to answer anyway. I grew up on Earth, he said. There are predators there that could kill you with ease. There are diseases that could wipe out entire populations. There are weather patterns that make survival difficult. Every day, humans have to understand that they could die, that the people they love could die. That time is limited and precious. We learn to value that time. We learn to value the people in it. When I saw that blade coming at you, I did not think about whether you respected me or whether you valued human life. I just thought that you were someone under my protection. That made it worth doing. Looked at him for a long time. In my 1,000 years of life, I have never met anyone like you, she said. We teach that strength comes from power and longevity, but you have shown me something different. You have shown me that strength can come from something that lasts only a moment, from something willing to burn bright and fast instead of burning for 1,000 years. She reached out and touched James's shoulder, the same way she had in the chaos of the medical bay. I was wrong about your species, said. I will admit this to my government. I will change the negotiations. We will treat this alliance as a true partnership, not as magnanimity toward inferior creatures. Your people have earned that respect with blood. James tried to smile but could not quite manage it. The pain was too great, but he understood what she had said. He understood what it meant for a creature that had lived 1,000 years to admit she was wrong. Thank you, he said simply, nodded and left him to his rest. But as she walked through the corridors of Station Aurora, everything had changed. The fragile human who was supposed to be weak had changed everything with one moment of sacrifice. And the princess who was supposed to be superior had learned something her 1,000 years of life had not till the negotiations resumed 3 weeks later. James sat in the observation room instead of standing at the entrance, his body still healing but his mind sharp and ready. He watched through the transparent wall as Princess took her seat at the negotiation table. She was different now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked a lot like resolve. Commander Lisa Park sat next to James, with a tablet showing the treaty proposals. "This is going to surprise everyone," she said, pulling up the new terms had submitted. "Look at this. Equal military representation, shared command structures, technology transfer agreements that actually benefit both sides." She rewrote the entire framework. James nodded. He had seen glimpses of the new proposals when had visited him in the medical bay. She had told him what she planned to do. She understood, James said. That is what matters. The negotiations took 2 more weeks. Earth's ambassador, a woman named Foster, was tough and smart. She had not expected that to suddenly treat humans as equals. When she realized they actually meant it, she took every advantage. By the end of the 2nd week, the alliance was official. Humanity and the Empire would stand together against the collective. The joint fleet was assembled in orbit above Station Aurora. 3 destroyers, 2 human cruisers, 6 smaller ships from both species. Together, they were a force that the collective could not ignore. They, of course, did not accept this. The attack came from the edge of the system, a strike force designed to cripple the new alliance before it could fully form. 20 assassin-class fighters, 3 heavy assault ships, a command vessel that was the size of a small city. The order went out. The human and fleet moved as one, something that should have taken months to coordinate but instead took only seconds. The tactical integration that James had helped design worked perfectly. Human ships were faster and more maneuverable. Ships had more firepower. Together, they covered each other's weaknesses. The battle was brief and devastating. The fleet was destroyed before it could ever get close to the station. Human pilots flew runs that had never expected. Weapons systems proved lethal in combination with human tactical strategies. When the dust cleared, not a single ship remained operational. But the real turning point came in the months that followed. The collective, realizing that their assassination strategy had failed and that a new powerful alliance now opposed them, began to fracture. Other alien species began to see the human partnership as a sign that perhaps they could be defeated. Alliances formed. Colonies that had been under threat suddenly found allies willing to help them. The balance of power in the sector shifted overnight. 6 months after the failed assassination attempt, Captain James Harrison was finally cleared for active duty. He returned to his command, leading a joint human military task force. The soldiers and warriors of both species had learned to work together. They had learned that humans could match in strategy and courage, even if not in raw strength. And they had learned that could learn from humans about sacrifice and speed and the kind of loyalty that came from short lives lived intensely. On the day James took command of his first combined operation, Princess was there. She stood in the command deck of the capital ship, wearing a uniform that marked her as co-commander of the operation. She had chosen to work directly with humans. She had chosen to learn from them. And in doing so, she had become something new, not quite human, not entirely, something that blended the best of both species. "Are you ready?" she asked James as they prepared for launch. "Yes," James replied. "Are you?" "I have existed for 870 years, said. "I have conquered worlds. I have commanded armies. I have done everything that my people taught me was important, but nothing has changed me like you did. You showed me that strength is not measured in years or power or superiority. It is measured in the willingness to do what is right even when it costs everything." James looked at her and saw something he had never expected to see in her violet eyes. He saw friendship. "We make a good team," he said. "Yes," agreed. "We do, and that is something my people will remember for the next 1,000 years, that we were humbled by creatures who lived for less than a century, that we learned about strength from those we called weak, that the greatest power comes not from the longest life but from the deepest commitment." The fleet launched. 30 human ships and 40 vessels moved out together, heading toward a disputed system that they had claimed for years. They would take it back. They would free the colonies trapped there. And they would do it together, human and united by something stronger than genetics or physiology or. They were united by respect. Back on station Aurora, Dr. Young watched the fleet leave from the observation deck. The collective was weakening. The galaxy was changing. And at the center of that change was one human soldier who had understood something fundamental about his species. Humans were not strong because they lived long. Humans were not powerful because of superior technology or advanced physiology. Humans were extraordinary because of what they were willing to sacrifice. Because they could look at something stronger and faster and more advanced and still choose to stand their ground. Because they could give everything for someone else. That was the truth that Princess had learned on that terrible night when an assassin's blade came down toward her heart. That was the truth that had changed her understanding of the galaxy forever. And that was the truth that would reshape the future of the entire sector. Humanity had always been underestimated. Species had looked at their short lives and assumed they were weak. But fragility was not weakness. Mortality was not a flaw. It was a gift. It was what gave humans the strength to face each moment with intensity and purpose and the willingness to make the hard choice. Captain James Harrison had bled to protect a princess who had called him worthless. And in doing so, he had shown the galaxy that humans had been strong all along. They had just been waiting for someone to finally notice. The fleet moved through space, heading toward battle and victory, and a future that was being written by those willing to sacrifice everything. The era of human dismissal was over. The age of human partnership had begun. And it all started because one fragile, mortal creature had stood between a blade and a princess, and had chosen to bleed rather than run. Third, she had learned humility. This was sacrifice. Stood in the doorway, blade raised, ready to finish what the assassination team had started. James raised his weapon, knowing it would do almost no good. But he stood his ground anyway, because that was what humans did. When faced with something stronger, something faster, something designed specifically to kill them, humans stood their ground. And sometimes they fought back. James Harrison fired his first shot directly at its head. That smelled blood. And Captain James Harrison, the small, fragile human that Princess had so thoroughly dismissed, would soon have the chance to show her exactly how strong a mortal could be.